Okay, hello and welcome to another Deep Dive Thursday here at Code Mentoring. Today, by popular demand, we're going to be looking into some front-end testing. So as we were sort of discussing as a team earlier, we're going to look into Puppeteer and how that relates to Jest, which is what we've been using for our clap, Marcus says, how that relates to our test runner. And then the nice thing about Puppeteer is that it's agnostic to any framework, whether it's React or Angular or Vue. Puppeteer is just a headless browser that spins these things up. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and get started. All right, you guys can see this okay? Excellent. I'm going to go ahead and open up my VS Code. Open up a new folder. Where are we? Code mentoring, webinars, call this Puppeteer. Okay. So, you guys, is this zoomed in enough? You guys can see this well enough? So I'm going to create a, just going to do a yarn init, -y for yes, to skip all the questions. All right. We're going to create a folder. We'll call this, in this case, we're not going to do any transpiling. So we're actually just going to call this dist. Right. This will actually be the HTML, CSS, create an index.html file. And call this tier test. One tier test. And depending on how much time this stuff takes, we might not even get into too much dynamic things today. We'll just look at some of the bare bones. So the first dependency that I'm going to install is going to be our friend Jest. So we're going to go yarn add -d for dev. Go and install Jest as a prod dependency. We go Jest like this. It's going to go ahead and add that for us. Then the second thing I'm going to add is Puppeteer. 2 Ps. Always, I encourage you guys to code along with what we're doing, and I will always post this code up on GitHub as well. So Puppeteer is not a small library from memory. I believe this actually installs a headless Chrome. So I think I already have that downloaded, so it's pretty quick for me, but let me know if you guys run into issues with this. We might need to stop for a second and debug some of that, so just let me know if that works. Okay, so I believe for memory, we have a plugin called Jest Puppeteer. Go ahead and Google this. Now, hopefully this should play nicely with what we're doing. So for those who don't know Jest, it's a test runner that we're going to be using to run our tests. Here we go. So a nice little preset that we've got here. Go ahead and go yarn add, again, -d, Jest Puppeteer. So we have 3 dev dependencies. Let me go ahead and create my jest.config js. Okay. So this preset is going to enable Jest to run and load this Puppeteer with what we're doing. So let's have a look at what else it's doing. Let's try this first. So we're going to load up a page, and we might try and test. Let's just try and test the Google page first. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this. You guys know the drill. Create the tests file. I'm going to call this, say, home.test.ts. Sorry, JS. We're not doing TS in this one. Paste it in. So let's see if this works. Yarn test -- watch, which of course we haven't set up. Little scripts test. Okay, so this needs to be exported. Module.exports equals Jest has an issue with some reason it can't run watch in a non-Git repository. I'm going to add the node modules and the node modules. Don't worry if I'm going too quickly. I'll put all this up on GitHub in a second. Try this again. It's doing something. All right, so what's this? It's not related. This seems to be just hanging, doesn't it? I wonder if there's something that we can see with this. Let's add some logs. Try running it without the watch. Test. Okay, so this looks a little problematic. There we go. So it's finally picked that up. Okay, so now we've got some feedback. It's probably saying it can't import this. So we'll say const rather require. If you're using TypeScript, you can probably skip that step. This again. Great. Okay, so let's break down everything we just did. So forget about the HTML for a second. We set up this Jest config with a preset. Now, to be honest, I'm just copying that from this Jest Puppeteer website. Repository. Now, preset and React, sorry, in Jest has a whole bunch of different configurations that this would do. So this would start to, it would basically inject this stuff into your Jest environment. So when you have a preset like this, that's what that's doing. So there's that. There's the require itself to make sure that we can run the Puppeteer. Then, as we looked at last week, we looked at the describe. We looked at before all. We got before each, and whatnot. Then we also have the it. So remember, this should read like plain English. It should, right? So when we see it in the output, it's much easier to read and understand what each test case is doing. So I'm going to pause for a second here while I upload this to GitHub, and I want to ask if there's any questions before we go ahead. Is there anything you guys are curious about on what we've covered so far? And just a reminder, if you're typing, I can't actually see that. So I'm going to say silence equals you guys are okay. Having some slight issues with VS Code today. Init commits. This onto GitHub. Code mentoring. Call this webinar Puppeteer. GitHub's just done a new update to their design. Everything looks very different. Git remote, add origin, sync that. And there you go. So all those files We're up here now. So I'm just going to paste that in for you guys for watching. There you go. So it's all there. Should allow you to copy these files, and I'll update that and push that as we move forwards. Okay, so what have we done here? The way Puppeteer works is you navigate to something first. So in our case, let's update this to, say, home page. And we're going to go to, let's say we want to go to HTTP to localhost port 8080 / on that. Now, obviously, this is going to break because we're not currently running this. So I'm going to go ahead and install another plugin called yarn add HTTP-server. What that will do is allow us to run a local HTTP server to just serve this dist folder. So we just say start HTTP server, and we just pass the name of the directory, which is dist. Now, if I go yarn start, you can see this here. It's running on port 8080, and that's just got that little HTML page that we created. So this is what we're going to use to test this little HTML page here. And as we move forwards, we're going to add more dynamic things to HTML. We want to add a button. Right? We want to see if the counter increases, or say increment. Say like h2 test 1 increment number. And we might have a div number class equals number, and we'll start at 0. Okay. So let's make this our first test. When we click this button, we want this number to increment, go up. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and so on. So we're gonna create a little test this. And we're actually going to use test-driven development. So for those who don't know what that is, test-driven development is a buzzword for essentially just writing your tests first. So how would we do that with this? How would you guys approach the incrementing? So increment button. How would you guys do a test-driven development with this? What would you guys look for? Any ideas around this? Well,
so would you test like at first it's 0, and then?
Yeah, that's a great test. That's a great first test. Let's do that first. So we've got this number. So we've got a class with this, or maybe we'll give it an ID. Number field. Let's try that first. So it should start at 0. So how do we do this inside? We've already navigated to the page. All right, so localhost 8080. Make sure that's running before you run the test. Now, how do we select something inside the page? So if we go page dot, what have we got here? We've got a whole bunch of different methods. Look at all these different things we can do. So many different things. Right? So in this case, they've actually exposed a really nice, for those who've used jQuery, they've kind of got like a jQuery-esque searching function with a $sign. So we're going to $sign, and then we'll just go hash number field. Number field. So let's just log this. Const field equals. Is this return a promise, or is this promise? Everything inside Puppeteer is a promise. So just be wary of that. Okay, so we've got our server running. and then in a separate terminal tab, go yarn test dash dash watch. Okay, so we've got something that's come back. A whole bunch of things in here. Let's change this to something else to see if it comes back as null. Great. So what that tells us is that if we have this set to this, that it actually can find the number field on the page. So that is exactly what we want, which is good. So why don't we try something? Why don't we try, if we remember our expecting something, and then you have what you expect it to be. So in this case, we'll say to match. Try this, we'll say 0. See if this works. I think you needed a wait on this as well. And there we go. Let's change this to 1 to see if it breaks it. Excellent. So this is a successful test. So any questions around how we got to this? If we started, remember we have to navigate to the page first. If we don't have this, we'll say it won't work. So having this is important, and we do that before every single one. So we navigate to the page, then we, like the jQuery-esque, so this is a selector. This is kind of like document.query selector. That's what this part here is. This ID of a number field, and we're saying to match. So making sure that it has 0 inside of its text. So yeah, Kevin, that was a great idea. What else? What else can we think of? What other ideas do you have around testing this page or test-driven development? Well, maybe we want to think about, does the button exist? Right? Does the button have the right text? So we can try that too. So number field might say, we call this ID equals number button. The number button should have text increment. So we'll do a very similar thing. We'll change this to number button. Change this to increment. See if that works. Great. So let's introduce something a little bit more complex. Let's say number button should increment field. Like this. So in this case, we want to grab the button. Now, what we can actually do is we can actually do a .click. So this Jest Puppeteer combination has some really nice shortcuts. So we don't actually have to select the button and then click it. We can actually do that in one go like this. And then what we can also do is, I'm pretty sure to extend another shortcut, we can go expect page. Now I think there's a to match element like this. And then we have the selector, which is the number field. And then you can pass in, say, the text like this. For now, we would expect this to be 1, not 2. Let's try this. Okay, so this didn't work. What's the problem here, team?
No logic to increment.
No logic. All right, let's fix that up, shall we? So why don't we have a little script? Here we'll say const etn number, document.get element by ID, number button, etn number, click, an event listener, click. On here, we'll say that logic that we're talking about. We'll also store this, we'll say field number. Field. And we'll say const existing equals field number dot inner HTML with parse int. My cat's very excited about integers. And then we'll simply say HTML equals existing plus 1. Now, if we come over here and refresh, that should hopefully, nope. Someone's joining us. Hello, Andrew. Thank you for joining. I disabled my JavaScript, so I always forget that. And there we go. So for those who can see, zoom in a bit. That is working very nicely. So there's that logic. Now, theoretically, our tests should work. So we wrote our test first, and now we would expect it to succeed. Let's try it again. And there we go. So why don't we try doing it a number of times? This one is now 2. There we go. So that is a short example of how we get Puppeteer to interact with our website. So I'm going to pause here. I want this to sink in. I'm also going to commit this to GitHub. Feature added basic tests. I want you guys to think about this and come up with some questions around some ideas, some other things you'd like to test. How do we do certain things? What are some questions you guys have? What are some things you've tested in the past on the front end that you might want to test here? Front-end testing can be quite a large topic, so I'm curious as to, we've got the basics now, so what are you guys interested in exploring as the next topic? Some ideas I have, we could do styling, testing styles, we could do testing of form submissions, we could be testing of links. What do you guys think? What are you guys interested in? Someone's messaging. Go and read that. Someone says styles. Sandy says styles. Yep. So we could test styles. That's probably a good idea. Why don't we do a similar thing where we've got some kind of entity, and then when we interact with it, let's do an input field. And when we click inside the input field, we want it to change color, the border or something like that. So we'll do a new test suite. All right, we'll call this focus input. We'll say focus field should start with gray border. Okay. We'll go ahead and delete these. So let's go ahead and grab the focus field, which obviously doesn't exist right now. Now, think about this field.css styles. I don't actually know how to get the styles. We might have to look this up. So Puppeteer get styles. So we can use an evaluate. I'd like there to be a shortcut, if possible. Just looking through their documentation, try and find some idea of how we would do this. Styles. Add style tag. Yeah, it doesn't seem to be an easy way, does there? Sandy's saying also testing if something is displayed or hidden. Yep, so we can do that as well. Once we have access to the styles, we can actually test a lot of different things. We could also test responsiveness. Let's do that one next. We'll add a little note for ourselves. Change the background color or something. Responsive design. To do. So we really want these styles, but we don't want to have that ugly solution. Get computed style. It really does seem that we need to evaluate. So evaluate inside Puppeteer. Essentially, this runs the JavaScript inside this code block inside the page, and then it returns that here. So you can do whatever you want inside this. It'll behave like a normal JavaScript. But I really did think there would be a nicer way to do this. I guess not. Let's go ahead and do it. So we'll add a little lib. So say lib.js, export const get styles equals. We'll say maybe a selector. We'll say page dot evaluate. We'll say, I think we need to pass this selector in. So here, selector again. That's just a way of encapsulating that variable. Say document.query selector. And we'll say return window.get computed styles for this element. So let's just break down what we're doing here, right? We're creating a little utility function for ourselves. Do a little document here. So this is going to be a string selector, so query selector of element. And this will get computed styles for a element. And we should do, we'll just do one selector. It's not going to return multiple, it's just going to return one. So remember, this page evaluate is run the JS inside the Puppeteer page. All of this here is now run inside Puppeteer. Not in Jest. That's a very important distinction. And then this returns those styles, which we can then use here. So are there any questions on this little utility function? I'll add that in for you. feature added.
So this only runs when you're running the test, right?
It runs when you call it. So in our case, it's going to be here. And we're going to go get styles. Like that. Excuse me. So it's imported that. And we pass in the selector, which is the focus field. It's going to be const styles equals. Let's just log this for now. Someone else joining us? Papa Pie. I don't think we've met. Thank you for joining. So theoretically, this should return something for us. So I'm going to do a dot only. So we're not running these ones now. Just want to run this. Okay. So what have we got? Export. Dual.exports. Hopefully fix that problem. Okay. So we have an issue here where the get computed style doesn't look like this exists here. So why don't we have a little bit more of a fallback? We'll say const le equals. We'll say if no le, throw new error. Could not find elements with selector. I'll set in, right? Selector. Hopefully that error will pass gracefully up. Let's see. No, it didn't exactly work. I'm not quite sure how to handle pass errors up like this. So for now, let's just return null. And this also returns a promise. So we'll do an await on this. Where were we? Down here. That's returning null because this selector doesn't, this input focus field doesn't currently exist. So let's go ahead and add that as another item. H2 test 2 input focus color. Rather input border color, because you can do like hover. We can also do a focus. Here we'll add the input and we'll give it a, what do we call it? Focus. Yeah, exactly. Focus field. Focus field. All right, so it's going to create a little input field on our page. Where were we? Yeah. So we have this little input field here now. So what we want to do is we want to test to see that it has a certain color in the border. Then when we hover over it, we want it to turn into a different color. And then when we click inside of it, we want that to be another color again. So there's actually going to be 3 colors that we test. So that's going to be the focus of this little bit here. And again, feel free to stop me at any point. You guys confused or whatnot. But now that we've added this focus field, yep, there we go. So we've got this styles coming back here, which is good. So get computed style. Maybe we also add a, yeah, that's fine. Let's try this. styles dot to border. So this comes back with. Find styles dot width. Okay, so it doesn't look like that's working. So why don't we pass in the field that we want? In this case, it's going to be border color. It's going to be the prop. Prop in here as well. And then instead of return, I think it's having. Oh, actually, now I remember. Now I remember what was the problem. I think it needs to be converted into JSON. JSON.stringify. Try this first. If this doesn't work, we'll do that individual prop method. I think because this computed style is something for. There we go. That's working now. So this get computed style is some fancy internal object. So what we're doing with this is we're converting it, we're stringifying it into a JSON string, and then we're converting it back into JSON. But this now is a plain text object. So convert to plain JSON, not the fancy CSS rule set or something. I forget exactly what it's called. So that's allowing us to pass this up back into the Jest context. So in here, we should be able to now say border this. And there we go. So we now have the border color, which is great. So can we do border color like this? Can. So very nice. We can actually start to get the styles now from this little utility function. So Sandy, this will allow you to do the hidden and not hidden. So for example, you could go visible, depending on what you've done. If you've done display, you could say expect display to equal block or display inline block. Or if you're using the visibility, go to visible, use the opacity. See what the opacity should be 1 in this case. So that will allow you to test that. So quite easily you can update this and query this. So let's add some default styles for our input field. So we need input, say border, say 1 pixel, solid, and let's set it to red to begin with. And when we hover over it, say it's blue. So border color. And then on the focus, so when we actually click inside of it, say it's green. What does this look like from a visual perspective? Pretty ugly. So it's red. Then if we hover over it, it turns into a blue. And then if I click inside of it, it turns into a green. So red, blue, and then green going inside of it. So that's what we want to test. Now, realistically, this is a very exaggerated case, right? In your components that you're building, we'd use something a little nicer than this, obviously. But this really is trying to demonstrate the power of what we can do here. So we would expect this to be red. Styles.border color. Now we can go expect to equal red. Okay, so you can see that it's actually normalizing the colors as RGB values. So go ahead and turn that into RGB. Kind of annoying, but way of the beast. 255 red. Excellent. So the first part of our styles is now correct. That is working. I'm going to pause for a second. Is there any questions that you guys had around this? Any questions on that little helper that we wrote? Again, I'm going to fix that. So fix created details. So that's up on GitHub for you. So what's next? The next part is this hover. So as we hover over it, we want it to be blue. So how do we accomplish this? Well, let's do our test-driven development. We'll say focus field should start with red border. We'll fix that. Should have blue border on hover. So let's try this. We'll say page.hover. They're gonna, very nice. We can very easily just pass in the element that we want to hover over. Don't forget to add the await. And then we would expect this to be completely blue. Straight off the bat, look at that. That's pretty great. So just to break down what I did there, we added the hover. You can very, very easily just pass in the ID or whatever selector. Right, we use the same principle as above. We've got the styles, and then we just checked the border color, and this time we want it to be blue. So I'm really liking Puppeteer. And now, of course, the last one is should have green border on focus. Someone sent a message. This tests any browser. Jest Puppeteer works specifically with Chrome. So Puppeteer is a headless Chrome browser. So hopefully that fits your needs. Okay, so this is going to test the green one. See if this works. So in the same nature that we did the hover, let's see if we can do the focus. There we go. Okay, so the green is a slightly different color. I'm actually going to change this to lime, which is the 02550. It kind of always annoys me how this red is the complete red, this is the complete blue, but the green isn't actually green. It's a off green. So the actual complete saturation of green with no other colors is actually called lime in CSS. Just a fun bit of trivia. This color here, this 02550, it's not green in CSS, it's actually lime. And we are good to go. Look at that. We'll call this input border color. And the last thing that we're going to do is we're going to test the responsiveness. So let's try that. All right, so we'll say body should have, let's say white or larger than say 400 pixels. So we'll say get styles, say body, say background color to equal 255, 255, 255. Then we want to say smaller than 400. All right, let's set it to gray. So I don't actually know the RGB for that particular CSS gray. But let's go ahead and say for our media query, media, say max width 400, body background gray. Okay, so let's try this and see if it works. So we should bring this in, and then, nope. Let's try the other way around. Ah, sorry, I need the pixels. There we go. And then as we come out, that should turn into a white. So this is what we're going to be testing. So I think in our page, we can do a page.resize. That work? Window. Now there is some kind of resizing. Is it browser.resize? Might have to go and look through the documentation. Ah, here we go, set viewport. Viewport of the page. In this case, set. Does it just take two numbers? Okay, no, so we also have the scale factor as well. You want to zoom in or zoom out. So you can really start to get some very custom tests with this. So in our case, we're going to set this to 399. Height doesn't matter. Right now, we should expect this to come back as gray, not white. We'll take off the only. Okay, so let's have a look what we got here. 0, 0, 0 for the first one. That's strange. Why don't we try HTML instead? That's quite a strange bug. I'm not quite sure why that's the case. It actually has an RGBA and it's set to black with a 0 opacity. I don't know why that's the case. That might just be a Chrome thing or something. I don't exactly know why. It seems to work. However, this one does not. Now we're going to, instead of 255, that mid gray that we had is 128. Exactly half. There we go. So let's just test that it's going to go back to the previous one. So we'll set the viewport back to, say, 401. We'd expect that to come back to the RGBA 0, 0, 0, 0. Just to make sure that it's back. Styles 2, styles 1. And there you have it. So I would say that is pretty much a wrap for today. What have we covered? So we've covered a little bit of interaction. So we looked at how to get pages, load pages. You guys can do your own custom navigation as well, and you can do this at any point. Right, so if you have like a button that you, say for example, you submit a form and then the form goes to another page, you can actually check all that stuff here. We learned how to select things using the jQuery-like selector. We learned how to read text and make sure it matches. We learned how to do things like clicking. Right. Then we came and we learned about, we created a little style reader using the evaluate, a very important concept to learn inside Puppeteer. So remember, this code is not run inside Jest. This code is run inside the browser itself. And we use that as a utility function in multiple places to get the styles. We learned how to do hovering, focusing, and browser resizing. So I'm going to go ahead and add all this stuff in. So final commit. And that's should be pretty self-explanatory. I mean, I'm curious if you guys have any questions or other things you want to see explored. This is obviously just an introduction into all the incredible capabilities that Puppeteer has. You can upload files. You can, there's so many different things you can do. Well, hopefully this is a useful introduction into how you can do some agnostic front-end testing. Remember, this doesn't have to be HTML. This could all be done inside React, inside Angular, Vue, whatever you like. So, yeah.
So, that's cool. That's cool. But I just have I'm just curious. How about the test coverage for this one? I mean, how many percent we should?
Great question. So the one problem with Jest is that it's very difficult to get test coverage. I actually don't know how to. I know there are some. I messed around with a library for work called Jest Puppeteer Coverage. When I was looking at this, it didn't work. So I think there was an open issue for this. That is a very good point. Yeah, it's an open issue. So I could not get this to work. I don't know if there's been any updates 8 days ago. I had a look at the Puppeteer to Istanbul, and I could not get this to work. So I would encourage you to play with this. Yeah, I downvoted this, so I couldn't get it to work. So this might be a solution. But I would have a play with it. If you can't do it, unfortunately, yeah, I'm not quite sure how to move forward on that. I still think it's valuable, personally, but that is a really good question. Any other questions on this? How it interacts with different environments, any features of it, how it works?
I'm just curious, like, wouldn't it be easier just to have someone test it, like, physically, the front end, instead of doing
Sure.
these?
What happens if you have 800 pages?
Okay, yeah.
So
Then,
if you make a change to a button component that is on every single page, or maybe it's on 60% of those pages, but do you want to do manual testing every single time you make an update to anything?
yeah, okay.
So that really is the power of these front-end tests. And you can integrate them. So you can have some kind of integrated test where you click on you submit a form, and then in the same test you go and test the database to see if that went from the front end to the back end. And that's what we call an end-to-end test. So there's a lot of value in this approach to testing. A lot of value. Just going to stop sharing.
Sandy's got a couple questions in the chat.
Great. What do we got? So check if loading. Does it work one page of testing at a time? You can actually run multiple pages at once. So you can create new pages. So if you go, I think it's browser.new page, you can span multiple tabs and do multiple things with them, which is very nice. So you can actually be running multiple tests at the same time, which is great. Yep, RGB color to gray. Just an FYI, if you guys are typing stuff into the chat, I can't see it. So definitely turn on the microphone or get someone else to call it out because I can't see it. Just for future webinars. If there's something you really want to say. Cool. Well, I'm going to stop recording. So thank you, YouTubers, for joining us again. See you next week.